It started with silence, the kind that settles over shelters late at night, broken only by the occasional rustle or sigh. But this silence was heavier. Rusty hadn't eaten in days. He barely moved. And then someone noticed he didn't respond to his name. Not Rusty, not anything. Until someone said jokingly, "What about Buddy?" The dog flinched, his eyes flickered, and from that moment something began to shift. Because that wasn't just a name, it was a memory, one that wasn't supposed to be there. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Oak Ridge, Montana. Late October. The town of Oak Ridge lay nestled between the fading gold of the cottonwoods and the early snow-dusted peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains. By late October, the breeze carried a hint of winter and the scent of damp earth, and each evening came earlier than the last. At the edge of town, where the road curved past rustling wheat fields and a forgotten gas station, the Oak Ridge Animal Shelter stood an aging building, with flaking green paint and a tin roof that trembled in the wind. Inside, tucked in the farthest kennel from the door, lay Rusty. Rusty was a 9-year-old golden retriever with a thick golden coat dulled by age and sorrow. His eyes were a warm amber, but lately they had turned glassy with grief. He had a muscular build, though his posture had wilted, since arriving his once proud stance now curled into the cold corner of his kennel head, resting on his paws, ears flattened against his head. Every night as the shelter dimmed and silence fell, Rusty would begin to bark. Not the protective bark of a guard dog, but long, mournful howls that echoed down the hallway like unanswered questions. He had been brought in 5 days ago by Carolyn Walker, a woman in her late 60s. Slender and tall, with a silver bun always pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, Carolyn carried herself with the poise of someone who had once been a librarian and still believed in alphabetical order and quiet rooms. Her pale blue eyes bore the weariness of recent grief. Her husband, Mitchell Walker, had passed away just 2 weeks prior. Carolyn had tried to care for Rusty on her own, but she confessed to the shelter staff that the house was too quiet and the dog's sorrow too loud. "I can't reach him anymore," she had whispered that morning, her voice quivering like the brittle leaves blowing outside. "He doesn't eat, doesn't move, just waits for Mitchell." Dr. Noah Fields. The shelter's full-time veterinarian watched Rusty from his small office window. Noah was in his early 40s, clean-shaven with dark brown hair that curled at the nape, often hidden beneath a faded gray beanie. He had the calm presence of someone who'd spent years around wounded things, both human and animal. Tall and lean, his movements were precise, his words measured. Noah had come to Oak Ridge after losing his younger sister in a hiking accident 10 years ago, something that had left him emotionally guarded but fiercely empathetic toward creatures in pain. He had a habit of talking to the animals under his care as though they were old friends. That evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the shelter in amber light, Noah entered Rusty's kennel for the 3rd time that day. He crouched slowly, letting Rusty catch his scent, and offered a few kibbles in an open palm. The dog didn't lift his head. Noah sighed and leaned closer. It was then he noticed something odd. Rusty wore a silver collar worn almost antique. The engraved tag was half buried beneath his thick neck fur, but a glint caught Noah's eye. He gently pushed the fur aside and squinted. The name wasn't Mitchell. It wasn't even Walker. Noah frowned and leaned back, whispering more to himself than anyone else. "That's not right." He didn't say anything to the staff just yet, not until he could be sure. For now, he made a mental note clean and examined the collar more thoroughly when Rusty was calm. Down the hallway, the shelter's back door creaked open, and a small figure tiptoed in, carrying a well-worn backpack and a spiral notebook covered in doodles. Lena Price, 10 years old, with tousled auburn curls and freckles sprinkled across her nose like cinnamon, was a regular guest, though not officially. She wore oversized sneakers and a second-hand purple hoodie that drooped past her hands. Quiet in school, but full of stories at heart, Lena found solace at the shelter every afternoon after class. 3 years ago, a flash flood had taken her dog, Marley, a black lab, who had been her best friend since she could walk. Since then, Lena had formed a habit of visiting the shelter, finding comfort in talking to the animals, especially the ones who looked like they had lost something too. Today, she made her way to Rusty's kennel. She knelt just outside the bars and opened her notebook. "Hi, Rusty," she said softly, her voice a gentle tremor in the silence. "Today's story is about a wolf who got lost but found a girl who wasn't afraid of him." Rusty didn't lift his head, but one ear twitched. Lena took that as a good sign. She began to read aloud, her voice growing steadier with each line. Noah, returning from the back room, paused when he heard her. He smiled faintly, but said nothing. Lena's visits were unofficial, but he'd never had the heart to stop her. As the story continued, the shelter grew darker, the wind outside pushing against the windows. Rusty gave no response other than a single sigh, but as Lena closed her notebook and got up to leave, she whispered, "I'll be back tomorrow. Promise." Noah waited until she had slipped out the back gate before returning to Rusty. The dog's eyes followed him this time, if only briefly. Noah crouched once more and gently brushed aside the fur at the collar again, hoping to confirm what he thought he saw. But Rusty growled low and warning and turned away. Noah backed off. He rubbed the back of his neck, a new unease settling in. The name on that tag wasn't just unfamiliar, it didn't belong, and judging by Rusty's reaction, it meant more than anyone had realized. Outside, the wind carried leaves like whispers down the empty road, and in Kennel 5, Rusty laid his head down, once more, eyes open, still waiting. The frost lingered longer each morning in Oak Ridge. A biting wind whispered through the bare branches that creaked against the shelter's windows, and even the sun seemed reluctant to rise. Inside Kennel number 5, the air was still except for the slow, rhythmic sound of Rusty's breathing. Dr. Noah Fields crouched just outside the kennel, one knee on the concrete, a soft cloth in one hand, and a piece of grilled chicken in the other. His eyes were focused not on the dog's face, but on the metal tag nestled in Rusty's golden fur, dull with age and nearly fused to the skin by time and matting. He had tried this before. 3 nights ago, when he first attempted to slip off the collar, Rusty had exploded into a defensive rage. The calm Golden had snapped without warning, growling, baring his teeth, and retreating to the darkest corner of the kennel, eyes burning with something beyond fear. Pain. Memory. Noah hadn't tried again until now. Rusty was watching him, his eyes weary but less guarded than before. The chicken helped. So did the voice, the calm, steady monologue Noah shared every visit, talking about the animals he'd treated, the books he read at night, the music he remembered from college. Connection, however fragile, had begun to take root. He held out the chicken first. Rusty sniffed, accepted it carefully, and licked his lips. Noah used the moment to reach forward, not to remove the collar, but just to lift the tag and brush away some of the fur. Rusty stiffened. Noah paused, whispered, "It's okay, big guy. I'm not taking it, just looking." Gently, he lifted the metal. Under the grime and time-worn scratches, a name began to emerge, just barely legible. Buddy Carson. Noah's breath caught. He blinked to be sure, then tilted the tag to catch the light better. The second word was faint, almost gouged out in places, but it was there. Not Walker, not even Rusty. Buddy Carson. He sat back on his heels, heart ticking faster than he liked. Rusty Buddy had belonged to someone else before the Walkers. Someone who'd named him, tagged him, and cared enough to etch it in steel. Noah rose slowly and backed away, letting Rusty retreat into his curled position in the corner of the kennel. The dog watched him with an unreadable gaze, but there was no growl this time. Noah left the kennel door closed and walked silently back toward his office. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood with one hand on his hip and stared at the notes tacked above his desk. "Mitchell Walker," he muttered. "So, where were you before that, buddy?" That night the shelter was quiet. Staff had gone home. The hallway lights were dimmed to a soft yellow casting long shadows on the linoleum floor. A side door creaked open near the storage closet. A small figure slipped inside, quiet as a leaf brushing pavement. Lena Price. The 10-year-old crept in like she had done many evenings before, wearing her faded red hoodie and carrying her beat-up digital camera, a birthday gift from 2 years ago that she'd never stopped loving. Her eyes scanned the hallway until she spotted Kennel 5. Rusty was awake, his head slightly lifted. She smiled. "Hey, boy." He didn't move, but his eyes followed her as she sat cross-legged outside the kennel door. She pulled the camera from her backpack, powered it on, and rested her elbows on her knees. "I think someone out there used to know you," she whispered, then raised the lens. The photo clicked without flash. It captured Rusty in half-shadow, his eyes reflective, and searching the silver tag on his collar barely visible beneath the curls of fur. Later that night, Lena uploaded the photo to a pet forum she had seen once on her mom's laptop, something about lost and found dogs. She didn't use her real name. She just titled the post, "Anyone remember this dog? He's called Rusty now, but I think that used to be different." In the caption she wrote, "He's quiet, kind, but very sad. I think he's waiting for someone. Please share if you know anything." She hit post and shut the laptop quickly, her heart fluttering, not in fear, but in hope. The morning fog hung low over Oak Ridge, softening the edges of buildings and cloaking the streets in a ghostly silence. Dr. Noah Fields stood outside a modest 2-story house with faded blue shutters and a sloping porch. The Walker residence sat at the end of Maple Lane, a cul-de-sac lined with whispering aspens and cracked sidewalks. A black wreath still hung on the front door remnant of the funeral 2 weeks prior. Noah adjusted the collar of his coat and knocked. The door creaked open a moment later. Carolyn Walker, tall and thin in her wool cardigan and gray slacks, blinked at him through a pair of silver-rimmed glasses. Her ash-blonde hair was pinned into a twist, and her pale face bore the soft wrinkles of grief still fresh. Though she had always carried herself with a quiet dignity today, her shoulders slumped just slightly like the weight of the world was beginning to settle. "Noah," she said, voice thin. "I wasn't expecting company, I know." "I'm sorry to drop in," Noah replied gently, "but I'd like to ask you something about Rusty. I think it's important." Carolyn stepped aside without a word, motioning him in. The interior of the house smelled faintly of lemon polish and dust. Photos lined the hallway, portraits of Mitchell in uniform, black and white shots of children long grown, and a few still lifes of flower arrangements that felt oddly formal. The house was clean, but there were untouched corners, spaces where time had stopped. They sat in the living room where a small fire crackled behind the glass of the gas fireplace. Noah folded his hands, trying to choose the least jarring way to begin. "I've been spending a lot of time with Rusty," he started. "He's doing a bit better, not eating much, but calmer." Carolyn nodded without meeting his eyes. "During one of our sessions," Noah continued, "I got a closer look at his collar. There's a name engraved beneath the fur. Buddy Carson. That's not your family name." Carolyn's head tilted slightly, her brows knitting. "No," she said slowly. "No, it's not. But that doesn't surprise me." Noah raised an eyebrow. We never gave him that collar. We found Rusty 6 years ago. Mitchell and I were driving back from a weekend at the cabin in Bitterroot. It was early spring, just past the thaw. There he was, limping along the edge of the highway, filthy hungry and dragging a bit of old rope. No collar then? You're sure Noah asked? I'm sure, she replied softly. We took him in, got him cleaned up. Mitchell bonded with him almost instantly, but he didn't have any tags or chips. We figured he was abandoned. Noah let that settle in the air. You didn't think to report him post a listing. Carolyn's hands fidgeted in her lap. Mitchell, well, he was just coming off a tough time back then. He'd retired from teaching, lost his brother the year before. I think Rusty saved him from sinking further into himself. We told ourselves if someone came looking, we'd return the dog, but no one ever did. Noah leaned back, slightly absorbing the weight of her confession. May I see some photos of when you first found him? Carolyn hesitated, then rose. We don't have many printed, but there's a photo Mitchell always kept in the study. He liked old-fashioned things, film cameras, real books, framed pictures. Wait here. A few moments later, she returned with a wooden frame, its edges worn smooth with age. She handed it to Noah. It showed a much younger Rusty. His coat, brighter eyes more alert, sitting in front of a fireplace beside a girl in her late teens. She had shoulder-length, dark hair, and a smile that seemed unsure, as though caught between childhood and something heavier. That's not you, Noah said gently. Carolyn shook her head. That's Clara, Mitchell's niece. She was visiting when we found Rusty. She adored him. Noah studied the photo. The collar was visible, faint but clearer than it was now. The tag glinted in the light. That looks like the same collar, he said quietly. Carolyn leaned in, frowning. It can't be. We bought Rusty a new one when we got home. Red leather. Noah turned the photo over. A small date had been penciled on the back, April 2nd in 2017. That's just a week after the date on the old vet record I found. For a Buddy Carson, registered in Cedar Hollow. Carolyn looked at him startled. You think Rusty was Buddy? I think he had a life before this one, Noah said softly, and someone might still be looking. She said nothing for a long time. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, in the quiet town of Cedar Hollow, a woman sat staring at a glowing computer screen. Heather Carson, 34. Petite with storm-colored eyes and a quiet strength in her expression, had been up since dawn. Her job as a wildlife technician meant early mornings and cold hikes, but today she was frozen in place at her kitchen table. The photo post had appeared on a forum she hadn't checked in months. A golden retriever. Eyes too familiar to be coincidence. Tag not quite visible. Caption written by someone named Maple Girl 10. Heather's chest felt hollow. 3 years ago, during her move from Portland to Cedar Hollow, her dog Buddy had vanished at a roadside rest stop. One moment he was there, the next gone. Flyers, shelters, social media, all had yielded nothing. Until now. She clicked the photo again, zoomed in. That face, that expression. Could it really be him? The Oak Ridge Animal Shelter was unusually still that morning. Even the most restless dogs seemed hushed, as if they too sensed something different in the air. The sky outside was overcast, the clouds heavy and expectant, mirroring the weight that sat in Dr. Noah Field's chest as he stepped into the lobby. His clipboard, usually pressed close to his chest, now hung loose at his side. Heather Carson was already there. She stood near the front counter, dressed in dark jeans, hiking boots, and a soft gray parka lined with faux fur. Her brown hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and her face, though clearly tired from a long, early morning drive, held a fierce focus. She was petite, maybe 5'3", with strong shoulders and calm, sharp eyes. Her job as a wildlife technician had trained her to observe without disturbing, to approach with a stillness that came from trust in nature's timing. Heather hadn't spoken much since arriving. She had driven in from Cedar Hollow as soon as she saw the photo online. The shelter hadn't opened yet, but Noah had agreed to meet her early. They spoke briefly in his office, where she showed him a worn picture from her wallet, Buddy, at 3 years old, smiling beside her at a lakeside cabin. The face in the photo and the dog in Kennel 5, they were nearly identical, save for the graying muzzle and the weary eyes. Now, they stood in the hallway that led to the kennels just outside the enclosure where Rusty Buddy waited. Noah offered her a reassuring look. "Take your time," he said quietly. Heather stepped forward. Inside the kennel, Rusty was curled into his usual place, tail-tucked chin resting on his front paws. He looked up when he heard the door click. His ears shifted, registering movement, but he didn't rise. Heather knelt just outside the gate, careful not to speak right away. Instead, she slowly unzipped her coat and reached into the inside pocket, pulling out something small and familiar. A red nylon ball, scuffed and soft at the edges. "Buddy," she said softly, her voice catching on the second syllable. "Hey, boy, it's me." The dog's head lifted, ears twitching forward with sudden alertness. "It's me, Buddy," she repeated, her hand still clutching the ball, now trembling slightly. He stood slowly at first, then took a cautious step forward. His nose twitched. He sniffed the air. Then he froze, just for a second, before letting out a small whine. The sound was low and hoarse, like something had broken loose inside him after years of being trapped. Then, without warning, he moved, trotted, then ran toward the kennel door tail, wagging in wide, uneven arcs, and pushed his head against the metal bars, pressing his nose through the gap with quiet urgency. Heather gasped, tears spilling fast, as she dropped the ball and reached through the bars, both hands cupping his face. "Oh my God, you remember," she whispered. Behind them, Noah stood still. In all his years of working with rescued animals, he had seen dogs perk up at familiar smells, even react to voices. But this was something more. This was memory made. Flesh, emotion returned whole. He stepped forward and opened the kennel door slowly. Rusty, Buddy, stepped out without hesitation, circling Heather, then sitting beside her, pushing his head into her chest, his entire body vibrating with joy and disbelief. Heather collapsed onto the floor with him, arms wrapped tight around his neck. They stayed that way for a long time. Meanwhile, just down the hall, Lena stood partially hidden behind a supply cart, eyes wide. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, really. She hadn't. She had come early to read to Rusty, like always, but then she'd heard the voice, the name, the sound of something unfolding that didn't belong to her. Rusty, no Buddy, had a family, a real one that had cried over him, one that had remembered him. She bit her lip hard. Her fingers tightened on the notebook she always carried. Behind her, Rachel, one of the volunteer coordinators, spotted her. Rachel was a kind-faced woman in her late 20s, always in a navy hoodie with the shelter's logo, her blonde hair twisted up in a bun. She approached Lena, carefully crouching to her level. "You okay?" she asked gently. Lena blinked, then nodded. "I thought I'd be sad," she whispered, "but I'm not. Not really." Rachel tilted her head. "I think maybe I was supposed to help him find his way back," Lena said. "And that's enough." Rachel gave her a small smile. "That's more than enough." They walked together to the lobby just as Heather was thanking Noah through teary laughter, one hand on Buddy's back, the other wiping her eyes. "I never thought I'd see him again," she said. "I honestly believed he was gone for good." "You didn't give up," Noah replied. "And neither did he." Buddy glanced back once as they moved toward the exit. His eyes landed on Lena. She waved quietly. He wagged his tail in reply. The day was unusually warm for late autumn, the kind of golden hour that softened everything it touched. Leaves fluttered gently in the breeze like small embers scattering across the sidewalk in front of the Oak Ridge Animal Shelter. Inside, in the community room, usually reserved for weekend adoptions and local school visits, a quiet meeting was underway, one that had nothing to do with paperwork or procedures, but everything to do with understanding memory, and the space love can make when it's not asked to choose. Heather Carson sat in one of the folding chairs by the window. Buddy lying peacefully at her feet, his eyes half-lidded in that sun-drenched sort of drowsiness only a loved dog knows. Heather wore a soft wool sweater and dark jeans, her hiking boots still dusty from the drive. Though she carried herself with quiet resilience, her eyes revealed something raw and bright gratitude, perhaps laced with a kind of awe. She kept one hand on Buddy's back as though anchoring him in place, making sure neither of them would wake from a dream. Across from her sat Carolyn Walker, a cup of chamomile tea untouched in her hand. Carolyn's posture remained poised, her back straight, and her legs crossed at the ankle, but something in her features had softened. The sorrow that once hardened her voice had been replaced by a reflective calm. Her silver hair was pinned back in a neat barrette, and her long wool skirt touched the floor like it was stitched from another decade. Her eyes kept drifting to Buddy with a gentle ache that had nothing to do with possession and everything to do with history. They had been talking for nearly an hour. At first, the conversation had been awkward measured. Heather spoke of the first time she met Buddy as a 6-week-old pup, how he used to carry her socks into the yard and bury them beneath the rhododendrons. Carolyn responded with stories of Mitchell's long walks in the woods, how Buddy would stop and sit beside him every time he paused to take in the view, as if silently agreeing with the beauty of it. Neither woman tried to stake a claim. They simply remembered. Dr. Noah Fields stood by the doorway, arms crossed loosely, allowing the exchange to unfold without interruption. He wore his usual brown utility jacket over a chambray shirt and black jeans, a quiet presence with sharp eyes and an empathetic weight behind every word. Though he was usually pragmatic, there was something deeply moving about this moment that silenced even his most scientific instincts. Then there was Lena, sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby, her ever-present notebook in her lap. Today, she wore her red hoodie under a denim jacket, several sizes too big, her curls a bit messier than usual. She had drawn a quiet sketch of Buddy, curled in the sun, one ear perked, one paw tucked. She didn't speak much, just observed, listening with the kind of stillness that grown-ups often forget to practice. Eventually, Heather turned toward Carolyn. "I never thought I'd see him again," she said, her voice low but clear. "But when I did, I knew. Right away." Carolyn nodded, her fingers brushing the edge of her cup. "Mitchell always said Rusty wasn't just a dog. He said he was the breath between silences. I didn't understand it then. I think I do now." Heather smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel right to take him completely away from that." Carolyn looked at her, surprise flickering in her eyes. "I mean," Heather continued, "Buddy Rusty, whatever we call him, he's lived a life with you, too. It's part of who he is." The room fell into a deep, thoughtful hush. Buddy shifted slightly, his tail thudding once against the floor. It was as if he, too, understood. What if Carolyn said slowly, "We didn't have to choose"? Heather looked up. "He could stay with me in the winter and spring," Carolyn offered. "The fire's always lit, and he loved curling up by the hearth. Summers and fall with you outdoors, trails, places he remembers." Heather's smile grew. "Split the year." "Split the love," Carolyn corrected gently. Noah stepped forward, nodding. "It's unconventional, but it's exactly what he needs." Lena couldn't help but smile. It was the kind of smile that starts behind the eyes and spreads slowly like warm soup on a cold day. Later that afternoon, as Buddy lay asleep between the two women who loved him, Noah found Lena near the reception desk fiddling with the straps of her backpack. "You ever think about volunteering here officially?" he asked. Lena looked up wide-eyed. "Me? You already show up more than half the staff," he said with a smirk. "And I think this place could use someone who knows how to listen." Lena beamed, her fingers tightening around her notebook. "I'd love that." "Well," then Noah said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a small blue volunteer badge. "Welcome to the team." Outside, the leaves kept falling, a quiet kind of celebration. Buddy, once rusty, once lost, now belonged to two worlds, two seasons, two hearts. And Lena, once a quiet visitor on the fringe of things, now stepped into a role where her presence stitched stories back together. The world didn't always give back what it took, but sometimes in places like Oak Ridge it gave back differently, richer, fuller shared. Sometimes the most unexpected reunions are not accidents, they are miracles in disguise. Rusty, once lost and renamed, found not only his way back home, but into two hearts that chose love over ownership. It wasn't just coincidence that brought Heather to the shelter or that led Lena to post that photo. It was something greater. This story reminds us that God works in quiet ways, through the hands of a child, the heart of a stranger, and the loyalty of a dog. He weaves stories of healing and redemption. In a world that often feels broken, moments like these remind us that grace is real, and sometimes love is multiplied, not divided. Maybe someone out there is waiting to be found. Maybe you're part of their miracle. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, tell us your thoughts, and if you believe in second chances and the silent work of God's hand, type Amen below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and everyone you love.